Hey, I'm Matt, and thanks for clicking on another Mr. Maple Show episode.
And I'm Tim. We greatly appreciate you watching all of our videos, and we appreciate you sharing them with your gardening friends.
Hey, today we're going to be discussing, do Japanese maples like full sun? So it's a very sought after topic, and we hope this helps you and gives you confidence in gardening with Japanese maples.
Do Japanese maples like full sun? This is a question we get daily. And, you know, it actually varies in different areas of the country.
Yeah, we hope to go over a few of the variables here that give you a better understanding of the sun tolerance for Japanese maples. Now, first off, I'll start out with saying there are a lot of different cultivars of Japanese maples. So, watch our What is a Cultivar video. I think that'll really help bring you up to speed there. Japanese maples are kind of like breeds of dogs, so different cultivars are going to have different requirements. So think of the difference in a Great Dane and a Chihuahua. You're going to get two very different things there, and that's certainly true of Japanese maples. So there are going to be some varieties that will handle more sun and some varieties that will handle more shade. Now, overall, Japanese maples are an understory plant in Japan. Tim and I were on a Japanese TV show, and we got to go and study with Nakata-san how Japanese maples grow in their native habitat. And they typically are more of an understory plant, but as Tim was saying, those trees do like to go in search of the sunlight.
Yeah, it was interesting to see them growing out near a river and see them growing out sideways near the river in search of sunlight. But they are naturally understory plants. That's where they grow naturally, is in the shade of other plants. So they're a great plant for the shade typically. You're never going to go wrong with a little morning sun and afternoon shade for most Japanese maple selections.
Now, we discuss this in a lot of our videos, but there are a lot of different sun requirements in different zones. So your area may vary a good bit. So what may work in our zone in full sun may not work in Dallas, Texas in full sun. So Japanese maples work zones 5 through 9. I'll always reiterate in all of our videos that zones are based on how cold it gets and not really the heat index. So it doesn't really factor in that upper scale. One of the reasons we like to say zones 5 through 9 is because it works pretty good for the East Coast. There's several conditions on the West Coast in which people can grow Japanese maples in full sun, even in zone 10. Now, as an East Coast grower, zone 8 is typically where you want to be for full sun exposure. And that zone 9 East Coast, you want late day shade on your Japanese maples. All of our Japanese maples that we do actually work in early morning sun to late day shade conditions. That's typically the ideal condition for Japanese maples, but there are a great many Japanese maples that can go in full sun exposures all the way up to zone 8 on the East Coast. And you want to check your heat index a little bit on that West Coast, as I was saying, because Aaron Dragseth is the example I use often. In his area, the heat index doesn't get too high, so he can grow a lot of Japanese maples in full sun zone 10. We don't run into that kind of condition much on the East Coast, but it is something to be considerate of and kind of take into factor on the West Coast.
On the East Coast, if you're in the South in Florida, you're going to need protection from the hot afternoon sun for mostly every selection of Japanese maple. Now, while there are a lot of Japanese maples that need this protection from the hot afternoon sun, there are some that are extremely resilient and easy to grow and can handle a lot more sun than other selections. So there's selections like Seiryu. That's an upright lace leaf Japanese maple that's very fast growing. It's a green lace leaf with an upright habit with a phenomenal red fall color. This makes an excellent tree for full sun in a lot of people's landscape and garden, and it's one of the most heat tolerant Japanese maples of any of the selections that we do.
Hey, we'll throw into the link below some of our favorite heat tolerant selections. We actually have a listing of those on Mr. Maple where you can filter to some of the more heat tolerant trees. Some of the classics work great. For red uprights, we often recommend Emperor I or Fireglow. Both those are exceptionally heat tolerant trees. They're going to do very well in full sun in most zone 8 exposures. Now, there are some factors there. What kind of reflective light are you getting? Are you putting rocks around the tree? You heard me mention that in other videos, but that can also have, residual heat that causes the tree to look burned. And you're going to say, hey, it's getting a lot of sunlight, I think it's burning. It may actually be that some other conditions are creating that burning look. So it may be that the roots are staying too warm from that stone. Another factor may be that your tree's staying too wet. Oftentimes people will say, my Japanese maple is burning up in the sun, and it's actually not. They're actually keeping it too soggy. So a lot of times when people send me photos of Japanese maples with sunburn, it's actually too much water. And it's kind of having that look like you got hit with a lighter a little bit, and it's having a little bit more leaf burn than you would expect. And it's because it's in the sun, but it's also they're overwatering because it's in the sun.
But that Emperor I, like Matt just mentioned, that's an excellent selection for a more sunlight condition for a lot of people that are looking for a tree to grow in full sun. That's one that you typically can't go wrong with. Like Matt said, if you're going in some of the deeper parts of the South on the East Coast, you're going to need a protection from the hot afternoon sun. But Emperor I is one of the best of the tall, upright red Japanese maples for that. On the other side of things, we've got some weeping lace leaves that do excellent as well. Well, some of our favorites are a Nabashidari, which is a cascading type. You can get almost purple tones to it. It greens up a little bit in the summer, but it grows well in the heat, gives you some good fall color, and really is an excellent cascading red lace leaf for high heat areas. We've also got Tamukiyama.
Yeah, Tamukiyama is a classic for that as well. It's definitely one you'll see that holds its color really well into the season. One that you might not see out there as much, but we try to carry a lot here at our nursery, which is fairly new, is Firefall. Firefall is an excellent heat-tolerant red. It's kind of becoming one of our gold standards for holding that color really late into the season, and we're really impressed with its durability and late summer color. Now,
I like that one a lot too because it's more of a cherrier red rather than that darker maroon red. And so it gives you something a little bit different, but gives you something with a nice weeping red lace leaf that's not your typical red lace leaf people think about. It's a little bit brighter in color, which is really nice.
Yeah, now these trees we're talking about here today, I'd like to reiterate, work great on the East Coast up to Zone 8 in full sun. Zone 9 on the East Coast, you are going to need some more protection for these still. So it kind of cuts off as you get into that deeper Zone 9 down in Florida. You're definitely going to want some protection. But in general, these work really good in Zone 8. You know, some of my favorite green dwarfs, of course, the lace leaf selection, Waterfall and Veritas work great. Those are going to be low cascading umbrellas. Very similar in shape to your Nabashidari, but with a green leaf to them. Now, my favorite overall green dwarf, you've probably heard me say this on the show before, is that Makawa Yatsubusa. One of the reasons I like it so much is for its durability. This is a tree that's going to be able to withstand extremes, either direction, hot and cold. So it's an excellent tree for that full sun garden. Also check out Ryusen. That's always been on that upper scale for full sun. I've seen it growing at full sun in the Dallas-Fort Worth Botanical Gardens there, and it always impressed me for how well it looked late in the fall. So it hadn't taken a lot of burn.
Yeah, Ryusen has an excellent cascading habit that just flows straight downward. It's got more of a palmate leaf, so that means that it has a little bit softer feel than a lot of other weeping selections. It's probably one of our top heat-tolerant weeping Japanese maples with that green color. And the other one that I like the most for that weeping cascading effect with green is a lace leaf called Emerald Lace. It is a bulletproof cascading selection that's extremely heat tolerant, handles a lot of heat, can handle a lot of sunlight in a lot of conditions, and really grow well for a lot of people in hotter climates. And so that's one that I heavily recommend for people in those hot climates. Talk about Makawa Yatsubusa, how can you go wrong with that? That's one of our favorites. It's one that's really unique and different. Just looks like those tightly layered shingles on a roof that Matt was mentioning. That's one that was the very first maple of the year.
Yeah. It was. When we ask nurserymen around the world, we always, when we're interviewing people, nurserymen or authors about Japanese maples, we often say, hey, what's your favorite Japanese maple? And that is often the most, that's the most common answer right there is Makawa Yatsubusa.
And then, if you're looking for another heat-tolerant dwarf, Kiyohime is an excellent dwarf that makes a round ball. And I think that's probably going to round out some of our recommendations.
Yeah, as we get into leaf, we'll do a whole video on the Heat Seeker series. That's something we're doing here at Mr. Maple, where we actually have evaluated Acer Olivieranum X's, and they even push zone a little bit more. They're even a little bit more heat tolerant. That's something for another video. I will throw in a few tips here for things to avoid in full sun. In general, now there are some exceptions to this rule for sure, but in general, the more pink or white you have in a Japanese maple, the more it's going to require some late day shade. So you're going to want to give things with a lot of pink or a lot of white a little more of that 3 p.m. on protection. A lot of people ask what I mean by late shade. The more shade you can provide as it gets into the hotter part of the day. If it's got a lot of variegation to it and a lot of pink and white, those are the plants that are going to want that protection. They're going to show a little bit more burn in a full sun condition. Now, there certainly are exceptions to that, but that's a good rule in general.
Yeah, and I just want to talk a little about Kiyohime too, because I love that cultivar for full sun situations. The neat thing about Kiyohime is it has a purple-red border around it in the early spring. It makes a nice little bun shape and it has more of a spreading habit to it. So it gives you a unique texture for a dwarf that can handle full sun. So this is an excellent dwarf that's going to go extremely well for a lot of people in containers. But one thing I want to say while we're talking about this video for full sun, if you're watching this video for full sun, you might also want to check out our video for tips for growing Japanese maples in high heat areas, because there's a lot of great tips we talk about there that might be really applicable for what you're doing in your garden and landscape.
So to reiterate a few of our points, can I grow Japanese maples in full sun? It definitely depends on where you're at. So be conscious of your location. If you're in a heavy zone 9, it may not be advisable. You may need an overstory plant that can provide some more late day shade for those Japanese maples. So be conscious of that. Also be conscious if you're putting it in the ground versus in a container. We talk about that in our other video as well, but that may be a factor versus whether those roots are staying too warm.
Be advised too that when you're growing a Japanese maple in full sun, it's going to require more water, whether it's in a container or in the ground, than one that's in a more shaded location. So definitely check out our video on watering Japanese maples as well. We try to put as much content as we can to help you feel more confident in growing Japanese maples, and hopefully this video is giving you a little more confidence in growing Japanese maple in full sun.
Hey, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We greatly appreciate all that. We're coming up on 9,000. We'll be doing more giveaways at 9,000 and 10,000. If we sound really aggressive in this video, it's raining really hard outside, so we're probably talking a little louder and more aggressively than normal. So no, we're not angry at you. We just want to get our points across to give you confidence in growing Japanese maples.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.